You want to be the hero of your own story. I mean, it's easy to feel like that because life is like a journey. And very often it happens in your life that you're cruising along in your boat, and all of a sudden, you end up in this really narrow strait with big rocks on the left and a big whirlpool on the right. And no matter which way you go, you know there's going to be trouble. So if you want to remain the hero of your story and not get destroyed, I think you ought to stick around because you're listening to The Misfit Mentor with me, Larry Marino. Welcome to The Misfit Mentor. I'm Dr. Larry Marino, and for over 30 years I've mentored people like you. We do it by telling true stories with helpful life lessons that give real guidance for your journey. I have lived a misfit life for a long time, and I can tell you one thing. At some point, we all need a mentor. I hope you'll think of me as your misfit mentor. Well, today's topic is really important because we all want to be the heroes of our own stories. I mean, that's just normal and natural. But we also know that life is filled with all kinds of situations in which, like being in a boat, if you go too far one way, you crash into the rocks, and too far the other, you get sucked down into something you didn't want to get sucked into. Look, your life's a journey, and you're the hero. And you're the one who has to decide what to do. The best I can do here is to mentor you, but you navigate the ship. It's your journey. And one thing you should know, in the hero's journey, in a lot of situations, there are going to be casualties. That's right, casualties. And sometimes those casualties are in the form of friendships that you'd like to keep, but they're not willing. And as much as you want to keep them, they're just not willing. And so there will be casualties, and there will be some other casualties that will really surprise you. And after this show is over today, you'll know better what those casualties really are. Okay, so let's get to the true story for today. Our true story today is about two guys, Robert and Ivan. And Robert and Ivan are a couple of young guys who work for an NGO. That's a non-governmental agency. Sometimes they call them NPOs, but they're the kind of groups that do humanitarian work. And these guys were going to be sent to Hungary. And of course, they were really excited because they were going to get to work with, guess who? Roma gypsies. So they were sent to do three things. It was very clear. Make friendships with the local gypsies. Try and find local leaders who can help direct the work on the field. And number three was really important. Under no circumstances were they to spend any money on any projects until they'd had about 6 months of trusting friendships under their belt. Now, why this rule? Well, because a lot of NGOs were scammed a lot of times by locals looking to make a quick buck off these soft-hearted NGO workers. And that's not cool. So a lot of times these workers would just sort of be a little too quick to give away the organization's money. And so they were taught at orientation, do not do this, boys. So they're very excited that they're going to get to go to Hungary. And it seemed like a pretty simple operation, but misfits seem to have a gift for running into weird stuff. So Robert and Ivan get to that village in eastern Hungary, and they are greeted warmly by everybody, but especially the Roma gypsies, and especially the children. And those first few weeks were like a party or like a honeymoon. Everything they did turned out perfect. Everyone with whom they visited loved them. They received them warmly. The kids were in and out of the house. They were playing soccer with the kids. There was real affection there in just a few weeks. And Robert and Ivan they were having the time of their lives. They thought, hey, this is what we trained for. This is what we want to do. And one night, Robert says to Ivan, this is going so well, but we still haven't found the local leader of the village. And so they knew that was part of their work too. So one day Ivan says, okay, we got to figure out who this man or this woman is. So they start snooping around. And a name keeps coming up. The name is Andre the Older. Not to be confused with Andre the Younger one, which is, of course, how collective cultures are. They're always using the older and the younger and all that. So after a few weeks of snooping around, they finally meet Andre the Older. A very nice, very affable man with a salt and pepper beard, very pleasant, easy to talk to. And he says, boys, come, I want to show you something. And he takes them to his house, and he opens up this big leather journal, I guess. And he's very proud to show Ivan and Robert the names and addresses of all the gypsies in that village are right there in the journal. All 997. And he goes on to explain that he is the only gypsy who has influence with municipal, county, and state governments, and he's the guy they deal with to make sure the gypsies are taken care of. And oh, by the way, you could tell that the gypsies really respected Andre. He was really a good, generous person. So Robert and Ivan feel like, wow, now this is great. Not only are we having a great time, but we found the guy, the elder, the leader that we're supposed to deal with. So they can hardly wait to write back. By the way, this is pre-internet. This happened a long time ago. So they can hardly wait to write back home and tell their bosses, hey, we're doing the things that we're supposed to do. But then things take a kind of a different turn. So one day after their first meeting, Andre says, I want to show you boys something. And so he takes them to a tenement building that is in need of repair. In fact, if you looked at it from the outside, you could see all the windows are broken. And they walk the halls, and Andre gets them inside some of the apartments, and it is specifically for gypsies only. And Andre says that, there's no way to fix these windows, and they need replacing. So when they get back outside, Andre says, I'll come to your house at 8 a.m. We'll have coffee. We'll go and measure the windows, all 23 of them. And then he leaves. And Robert and Ivan are looking at each other like, what just happened here? And they get in the car, and they're not talking to each other because the anxiety is building inside both of them. And as the day wore on, it got worse. In fact, they both skipped dinner. They couldn't eat. See, it was clear to them, now they're in a fix. Because you see what was happening. Andre, the elder in charge of everything that had to do with gypsies, shows the boys this place that needs 23 windows. And it was as if he was saying, I've showed you the journal. You know I'm the man. I've showed you the windows. I'm the elder. You have to buy these windows. Now, Andre was a kind of a person. They could tell right away that, if we don't play ball with Andre, we might as well just leave the village because all these people listen to Andre. And it seems so hopeless that if we give in to Andre and we buy the windows, they're going to take us off the field. And we'll look like idiots. But if we refuse to give in to Andre's request, he's going to close the door on any other friendship or projects. And those 997 people who are so nice to us, they probably won't talk to us anymore. You can see for them it was like, yeah, if we go right, we crash. If we go left, we get sucked into something that we don't want to get sucked into. Well, needless to say, that night was not an enjoyable one for Robert and Ivan. They both stayed in their rooms, and the way they explained it, it seemed like all they did was look out the window all night, and then in a matter of minutes, the sun came up, is what it felt like. You ever notice when you don't want the sun to come up, it always comes up so fast? Well, that's what it was like for these guys. And they just cannot come up with an idea. How do we get out of this? Now, I hope right now you're seeing how this could apply to your, or maybe you're in this kind of a situation. No matter what you do, maybe it's like no matter who you try to make happy, you lose. Man, I hate when that happens. And when these guys came to see me, what's funny is that I thought there was no way to get out of this. By the time I'd heard about the story, it was already over. And they told me about it, and I said, wow, there's no way out of this one. But I have to admit, I was wrong, because here's what happens. Needless to say, they don't sleep. So at 8 o'clock on the dot, there's Andre. The boys are in the kitchen, pouring the coffee, cutting up the coffee cake, all that stuff. One last time, Ivan says to Robert, what are we going to say? And Robert says, I don't know. They put down the coffee and the cake. They do some small talk. And then Robert says this. Andre, there's something I have to say. Ivan and I were sent here to help the Roma people, your people. And we're really happy to come and do this if we can. But here's our problem. They sent us here on this mission to find out first what the needs are, and then to make sure we stay here long enough so that we can assess with the local people what is really needed. And the problem is we haven't yet been here for even 1 month. And if we put in this big request for windows, the organization that sent us will probably send us away. Now, the way these guys explained it to me, they said this. We didn't know what to say at that point, and it was like Andre didn't understand. So then Robert said, it will be a big shame on us if we do what you ask. And that is when Andre's face, they said, changed. And they said his face changed from sort of matter of fact to kind of sadness and sympathy. And Andre actually said, oh, I didn't mean that you have to do the windows. It's only, people come all the time. They do this. And I assumed, but I should not have assumed. I don't want to put you in the shame at all. Tell me, what do you want? Robert says, well, we're just trying to make friends. That's all, nothing else. Andre said, that is better than the windows. Let's make a party. And they did. In fact, they rented the local community center in this village. And not only gypsies came, but all the white people. These were the Hungarian nationals. The gypsies call them white people. And they hadn't done this for ages, to have a party where white people and gypsies were together. But because Robert and Ivan were there and they wanted to make friendships, people wanted to put their best foot forward. See, this is the beauty of cross-cultural work. They met at this party so many other gypsy leaders who wanted to help. They met white Hungarian nationals who said, well, can we help too? And everybody just came out of nowhere and said, come on, we want to help. And it was as if this little village with maybe 3,000 people had decided, we now have a new common purpose. We got to help these boys, Robert and Ivan. They came to help us after all. And they did. And from what I understand, they even go back there. This happened years ago. And their families visit. And like I said, that's the beauty that I hope some of you will get to experience working across cultures. Very often, people will do things for you when you travel to their country that they just wouldn't do for anybody else, because they kind of feel like, well, we want to show our friends a good time, or we really want to be hospitable. And it was a win-win for Robert and for Ivan. Now, let me ask you a question. I run into so many people who are in our listeners' age group in the 20s. When I ask them what they want to do, they always say, I want to work for an NPO or an NGO. In other words, I want to work for an organization that's not about money, but it's about really helping people, and about helping people that society is sort of marginalized, like gypsies, or I know a lot of people who work with some of the Indians in Guatemala. They're terribly marginalized as well. But these kinds of groups need help. And these organizations are great, especially if you get with the right one. And I think a lot of you that are listening right now really want to do that. Or perhaps some of you that are listening are actually doing the work right now, and you can really understand what I'm talking about. But think about that goal for a second. Do you really want to do that? And I think you're saying, yeah, I really want to help people. I'm not about money. I mean, I need money to live, of course, but being in service to fellow human beings, that's what I really want to do. All right. So let me ask you this. Are you behaving in a way that'll really lend itself to that? I'm going to ask very specifically. Do you have a hard time admitting that you're in a tough spot, or putting yourself in vulnerable situations? I mean, could you admit, just like Robert did, we will be ashamed if we do it the other way? I mean, most people don't do stuff like this. And this is why when they told me the story, I never thought that they could have figured a way out. See, they didn't look for a shortcut. And that's what I'm asking you right now. Think. Are you trying to get into situations where you don't have to be vulnerable at all? Or you never get into a situation where you're going to be humiliated or shamed? Well, if you got to protect that, then I hope you see the conflict between what you say you want and where you want to go and how you want to serve. But if it's all about protecting you all the time, it's just not going to work at all. Now, there's some life lessons that we can pull out of this true story today, and they're going to be coming up right after this. This show is a part of a group called G2G. We're a nonprofit group doing humanitarian work in Eastern Europe with Roma Gypsies, and we also produce this show. So, if you'd like to be a part of our work, you can go to misfitmentor.com, hit the support us button, and you can make a tax-deductible gift right there. Thank you very much. All right, let's get to the life lessons that we can pull out of this story. The number one life lesson that you can pull out of this one is if you really want to be in service to people, you got to tell the ugly truth about how you feel, about what you think, no matter what it is. Because you know what? People in every culture really respect when a person puts themselves at the mercy of their kindness. You really can't lose. You know, when the truth is self-deprecating, always tell the self-deprecating truth. Every time, put yourself at their mercy. Be vulnerable. Let them know we're in a tough spot. You know, what did Robert say? We will be in shame if we do this thing. I mean, think of that. Now, that would be one life lesson you can really, really take home. The other one is this. Remember I said there will be casualties, and there will be. Like I said, sometimes, as in my own life, you know, I wanted to do certain things, and other people just said, well, then you can't be my friend, or you can't be in this circle, you can't be in this family. That's not so easy to take, and I wish it wouldn't be that way, but, you know, I didn't want that, but sometimes they'll do that, and you got to know this. You've got to get comfortable with the idea that there are going to be casualties. Let me talk about, though, the real casualty of all of this. You see, the real casualty here was Robert and Ivan, because the old Robert and Ivan, on that day with Andre, died. And what they did that I thought was so heroic is they must have realized, in a way that I can't even describe, that they're not the heroes of the story at all. But the people they're serving, they're the real heroes. And that is heroic. But if it's all about protecting your heroicness, nobody's going to want you around. And you're never going to pass orientation with that kind of an attitude. So please keep this in mind. The only way to be the real hero of your story is to remember you're not the hero. The people you're trying to serve, they are the real heroes. And that's why I say here on this show, no way I'm the hero. You are. I'm trying to serve. I'm just the mentor. But you've got to now do the same thing. Wherever it is you're serving. I don't care if it's here or if it's in business or if it's overseas with an NPO. Whatever it is, you've got to keep in mind the people you are serving are the real heroes. Now, for those of you who are Greek mythology people, you probably realize I stole all of this from Odysseus and going through the Strait of Messina in the story. When he travels through the Strait of Messina, you know, on one side he's got a 6-headed monster, and he gets a little too close and loses 6 men one day. As he's coming back the other way, he travels too close to, her name was Charybdis, and she was a whirlpool with teeth, actually. and the whole boat got sucked down. That time, he was the only one survived by hanging onto a tree. Both times, there was a cost. Both times, he was humiliated. And there's no way around it. There are times when you can't get around it. Humiliation is going to be a part of your life if you want to succeed at anything. Now, you may notice, not many people are going to tell you this. And it's very simple. It's very bad for business. I mean, they can get a lot of money from people for just not talking about this. See how simple it is? But you don't want that. You want to know what's really real. Talk to anybody who's achieved anything, and they'll tell you they've been humiliated, embarrassed, everything you can think of. This is why I think this man, I've quoted him before, Jorge Luis Borges, he said it like this: a writer, and I believe generally all persons, must think that whatever happens to him or her is a resource. All things have been given to us for a purpose, and an artist must feel this more intensely. All that happens to us, including our humiliations, our misfortunes, our embarrassments, all is given to us as raw material, as clay, so that we may shape our art. Well, I have to say, I really, really enjoyed doing this episode for you. I hope that you have enjoyed listening to it or watching it on YouTube. I have to say, we're very grateful to our executive producer, John Crable, also our producer here in the studio with me, my son, Adam Marino, also the great people at WELT, but mostly all of you who are listening, thank you very much. This is the Misfit Mentor. I'm your host, Larry Marino, and we'll see you next time.